My name is Matt Branson. I'm the product manager for electric strikes for HES. So we got a new baby here, the HES ES100. I really want to talk about. It's kind of dynamically changing the landscape and finally bringing wireless technology to electric strikes, which is awesome. But we'll get into that here in a little bit and just kind of scoot forward, start with a little bit of introductions, who we are. Again, HES Abloy Opening Solutions America employ over 9,000 people with 28 factories and bunch of different countries. Specifically, this is kind of how we're made up here. The ones highlighted in red are here in Phoenix, which are the electronic security hardware, HES and Securitron, alarm controls, Adams Right, and very newly, within the past 6 months, life safety power. So that's something to keep note on. We've expanded our factory footprint to bring in more brands. So we're all kind of working from the same space and sharing minds. It's working out really well. Again, if you know HES Abloy or anything about HES Abloy, it's kind of curb decor and everything in between. So it's actually kind of expanded beyond curb decor. We have buildings, right? But we're also working on managing industrial gate locks and traffic locks, because a lot of times around Super Bowls or when there's a president visiting or something like that, we need to have some sort of way to secure and lock down all the traffic control cabinets and make sure people aren't getting into them. So again, security is needed in both kind of a physical and digital layer all throughout our entire lives, whether it's in a building, on a mailbox, if you're going to pick up a package from a Walmart or Walgreens or something like that, and you're getting it from like a traffic cabinet. Those things are all important to be able to provide a physical and digital layer of access control. But first and foremost, safety matters. And right now we all obviously know we're still amidst or post, in a pandemic. And so a lot of people are getting sick. There's flu going around right now. There's COVID going around. There's a lot of different things, stomach bugs. But all we want everybody to be sure is just to be a responsible adult and be safe and make sure that you're giving everybody the proper distance, washing and sanitizing your hands like you normally would, and just, reducing your touch points and giving everybody their own personal space. And always having, the emergency numbers and first aid kits and all the proper protective equipment for you to be able to do your job and for everybody else to be able to do their job as well. All right, moving along, talking about our products. Our warranties are really important to us and we pride ourselves on them, not because we expect customers to have to use them. It's actually quite the opposite. So with Securitron, there's the lifetime warranty, the MagnaCare, which if you drop it off your forklift, it's in the back of your truck and falls out and gets damaged, just send it back to us, we'll replace it. And HES electric strikes primarily are covered under a 5-year warranty, which is the 1,006, 4,500, 5,000, some of the most popular. And that's a no questions asked warranty as well. Once they merged together, it kind of became a no questions asked. And then if you add the smart pack in, which kind of cleans the electricity going inside of it and reduces the amount of surges, specifically in the 1,006, and reduces some of the heat in that continuous duty solenoid on the 1,006, you can actually bump that warranty up to 10 years. Another product out of the box that has a 10-year warranty is our latest release in the HES 1,500 and 1,600. And then some of our other products, when cabinet locks or Aperio related, are covered under that same Securicare no questions asked warranty, but it's a 3-year warranty, primarily because the electronics and everything inside of it and the advancement of the technology and digital footprint of it limit that just a little bit. And there's the HES ES100 falling underneath that Securicare Aperio warranty for 3 years, no questions asked. And as we dive a little bit further into it, you'll see kind of the benefits and features of the strike and where you think you may be able to use it, because there's a lot of different applications it can expand to. But today in access control, what are the challenges we're really facing? A lot of times we can't run wire to the opening, or we don't want to run wire because it's painful. There's no drop there. Somebody assembled the building and didn't plan on adding access control, yet the owner of the building would like to have it there. Tight deadlines. I mean, a lot of times you're buying strikes that are on the shelves just because that's what's there. I mean, that totally makes sense. And you need a simple, economical installation. Right now, that's economical is actually more important than a lot of the other things out there, especially in the eyes of businesses and how they've had to react to everything going on in the world right now. Also, if you're trying to add access control or expand access control inside of a building, so it already exists elsewhere, and you want to keep using those same user credentials, the existing ones in the software, it's easy to expand with the product we're offering today and require the online door control. I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, it's tied into an access control panel, I can tell when it's locked and unlocked, but being able to remotely unlock it and have a log, an event log of who's been visiting is really important, especially when we're talking in facilities like hospitals and schools. And then again, this product is great for non-traditional applications. We'll talk about that in just a little bit because you don't have to run wires to the product. So a little bit of today's agenda, we're going to talk about site survey and wireless considerations, because when you're installing a wireless product, there's a little bit more you have to consider on a site survey. It's not just, how does the door sit in the frame? How's it swinging open? Is it dragging on anything? Do I have a wire here? There's a lot more wireless interference and things to keep in mind. Then we're going to talk about the ES100 product itself, overview of the products, the benefits, the features, a little bit about Aperio and how that ecosystem works in regards to wireless technology, and then hub placement, and then finally wrap it up with anybody you can contact if I didn't cover it today, or you have more questions, or you want more information about it, or you want to order one even. We'll have all that information there at the end. Let's start with site surveys. So recommendation for the proper solution for each customer's application. A site survey today currently includes a review of function, different codes, the surroundings and existing conditions. So, realistically, is this an exterior application? Is this an interior application? Is this meant for primary use? Is this crash bar? Or is this more like a closet style lock set or storeroom? And then the restrictions. So let's say you're in a fire well, or you're in a clean room. There's certain restrictions that you have to apply, or even like a large freezer that you want to add access control to. There's a lot of different restrictions that apply not only to the building, but also to life safety and codes, which are mentioned further up. So what are your most important tools for a site survey? Decorative covering wall, what's behind it? Boom. I know a lot of you guys, so Roger does a great job. He wants to survey everybody and find out, what do you think one of the most important tools? I'm going to go out and just tell you, your hands, your knuckles, they're part of your body. They're what you have. When you can knock on a frame and tell, if you don't know where a stud is in a wall in your own personal house and you want to knock on the wall, you can easily tell where the stud is. Well, a lot of times just by doing this simple tactic, you can find out what's behind the door and how difficult it's going to be to cut that in. So when we're talking about running a wired solution where there may not already be conduit there, this is very important to find out what's behind that door, because you may be cutting into concrete or something you did not expect. And then some walls and ceilings have no access, kind of making it super difficult to run wire or conduit or even molding. And so that's where we get asked a lot. And one of the reasons why we developed this product is there or can there be a wireless options? Because strikes are so small, the solenoids inside them are so small. We have a lot of brick, cinder blocks, specifically in schools, and concrete that we still want to be able to provide access control to. But it's so painful to have to core this stuff and get any sort of wiring through it, or we do surface mount and have to run all kinds of tubes. It's really just kind of painful and time consuming. And sometimes we get feedback that even some of the locksmiths, depending on where you're at in the country, aren't even allowed to run the power. So, you have to have somebody else run the power for you. So you just install the product, and then if it doesn't function properly, because you're not able to test it because there's no power there, you have to go back and revisit it, which again, it's just more expense and more time that you really don't want to waste while you're installing your product and trying to get a solution for your customer. So we're talking about wireless application opportunities. So we want to find our pathways to our hubs, right? So you look at these doors on the left here and being like a solution to add access control. It's all center block, brick, tilt-up walls, all that kind of stuff. So it's really hard to run wire. And if you look at this 8000 series strike somebody put here, it looks like they cored a little piece out of the frame there and have the conduit literally running right there. So if you wanted to cut power to that strike, I imagine it'd be pretty easily. But when you see those type of applications, you look up and you see the paneled roofs. That's where you can install something like this Aperio hub pictured down in the bottom middle that can kind of communicate with all this. So if you look at this looks like a dorm, kind of like a quad. So on the right-hand side, the future leaders walk these halls. If you were to have that up in the ceiling, you would be able to provide access control specifically with the Aperio devices, up to 64 devices to one hub. So they range, there's a 1-to-1, a 1-to-8, 1-to-16, 1-to-64. But again, you can communicate with up to 64 devices with a single hub if you have the latest version with the latest firmware, the AH40. So there's a lot of special considerations, and this is actually a site survey we did with the hospital, and we worked with their IT department, because if you look along the ceiling there's a whole line of panels with a bunch of different items on it, whether it be the fire alarm, a cell phone repeater, a Wi-Fi repeater. There's a lot of different things to take into account when you're mounting your hub. If you see the closest one here, that's actually the hub up in the top panel. So we really need to visual inspect the area and kind of the surroundings, like we talked about a little bit earlier, for desired hub location. So we want to pay particular attention to, if we're going to be doing like an outdoor installation, metallized reflective surfaces, and a lot of that has to do with like the window tinting. Sometimes the way that the 2.4 gigahertz band communicates through it, it gets filtered or blocked or reflects off of it. We also have to take into account some absorbing materials, different building materials, and nearby transmitters. So, you know, obviously this is just one specific platform or one specific ecosystem, but you could have everything else in there as well. So you want to look at their adjacent band harmonics and other wireless emitters. So you want to make sure you're not mixing up channels and causing any kind of chatter in that wireless communication between the products. And then be aware of areas where people may congregate and use their cell phones. So again, it's just like being on an airplane. I know everybody thinks my one plane's not going to take down the airplane. That's really not what it's about. It's more about the communication between things. So the more devices there are there, the more noise and issues there could be in that area. And when it's like let's say a lounge room or something for the nurse workers, the doctors, everything like that in the hospital, there tends to be a lot of interference there. And you tend to not see a lot of wireless applications because of that. Oh, trying to move forward here. I didn't realize that he highlighted everything up top. So there's our hub, there's the cell phone tower. Awesome. And then another thing that we already talked about is you have to take into account a lot of different codes. So again, we have our, you have to be familiar with what ICC code series is adopted in your area. By series, we mean year. And specifically, that's important because the AHJs who come and review your install, if it needs to be fire rated or anything like that, or if any sort of county, state, federal department needs to come and inspect your installation, make sure it's up to code. You need to make sure that you're following the latest adopted year near you. We have a couple sites here, the iccsafe.org and FPA. And for those in Canada, we also have the Code Guides NRC and the BC publications here. This is just really important when you're doing it, because there's no point in doing all this work and then not being compliant. You have to rip it out and switch to something else. That's not the point. The whole point of using our product is to make it simpler and easier for you to do your job, not more painful. And again, just to touch, we have the typical applications and codes from IBC, IFC, and NFPA dealing with electronic controlled doors. So which codes adopted, which years adopted, have there been any changes or written policies since then? And then pay particular attention to which your AHJ is looking after. And if you have any questions or any problems, always reflect back to the handbook or reach out to Russ and Roger. A lot of times they're great resources and they're willing to help you out if you have a question that may seem obscure, or even if it's something that you're new to this and it's out of the norm and you're not comfortable with it. They're a great resource and wealth of information. Although I highly recommend just looking at the code book first before reaching out to them. And then maybe there's a clarification you need in the code book that they can help you with. All right. Next, what's really important when you're talking about ratings is products, and they have to be certified, third-party certified, specifically a third-party reviewed. Meaning, if you look at these here, this is our 1500. We've got a fire rated burglary label there for 3 hours. And we also have a fire rated, if you move to fail secure sticker, meaning you have to remove that and it no longer becomes fire rated if converted to fail secure. And that's pretty much any product in the market. And then also windstorm resistant. So again, if you want to use these in Gulf Coast areas, like let's say Texas or Louisiana or somewhere around there, and there's a chance for hurricanes, these are the type of strikes you have to have on your exterior openings in order to maintain that windstorm resistance. But it's not just the hardware here that you're seeing, which is our strike. It's actually a door, it's an assembly. So yes, our product is listed individually, but it requires appropriate latching hardware and appropriate doors to be able to maintain, because you can't just throw a glass door up and say, oh, I've got a windstorm resistant strike, it's going to be able to withstand hurricane winds. Well, that's not necessarily the case. It's kind of a whole application and a whole suite or solution of products that has it. As you can see on the top right-hand side, we have the frame and the door both listed as rating, and then the Sargent latch here also listed, or the lock set listed as a UL fire rated as well. Awesome. So we covered our site surveys, wireless considerations. We'll follow up questions at the end. I'm trying to keep pace with time here, but I really want to talk about the ES100, and this is where I tend to run on because I'm really excited about it. So for those of you who are familiar with our 1600, what we did was we replaced the solenoid inside with a motor. So now the driver reduces, the amount of power needed significantly in order to function. So that being said, we already have a product in the R100 that's out there that's a wireless Aperio product. We tethered the two together. So although you don't have to run any wires to the door, you would have to connect both the reader and the strike, because the reader powers the strike with two AA batteries. So essentially the solution combines a reader, so an integrated reader with NFC, BLE, procs, and iClass card technologies through HID with one of our motorized either 1500 or 1600, and we'll talk about the differences between those here, and connect those two, and they communicate wirelessly to a hub, and you have the ability to provide access control, remote unlock, all the capability that your access control has, you can use with audit trail logs with this product. So it removes the most difficult and painful part that I already talked about earlier, was that running wires. So what's awesome here is you still get to keep all your grade 1 strength, you still get to keep that warranty. The biggest thing with the 1600 is the compatibility. So you get a mortise lock, cylindrical lock, anyone in the market, the Schlage L9000, I mean, even the more problematic, more drop bolt style lock sets, these strikes work with those. So what's awesome with this, rather than having to carry a bunch of different lock sets with you or a bunch of different strikes, you have one solution that can provide access control and allow them to keep their existing hardware and just use a compatible strike that ties back to your access control system wirelessly. So you still maintain that fire rating, windstorm resistance, and burglar rating that you did before. So that's really what's important here, is you still have all the benefits of the product as it exists today, but it also includes an integrated reader and it's wireless. It's really, really cool product. And you'll be surprised at the attractive price point it comes at in regards to what a reader and strike would come at separately today. So I always do the comparison to the 1516. So what's really the same, what's different? This is kind of a snapshot of what's different here. So the 1600 is going to be hard powered, where this is going to run on 2 AA lithium batteries. Lithium is important here, and that's why it's in bold. That's what we tested our UL fire rating with, and it's required to be used with the products as well because it wasn't tested on how anything else will behave. The good news is lithium batteries tend to ignite, so we kind of tested with worst case. So the good thing here is they have a nice steady curve, so it's easy to predict how long they're going to last, and also that's what begets our fire rating and windstorm rating and everything we've tested under. It's still UL fire, UL windstorm, but the ES100 is not actually outdoor rated. It met all of the outdoor rating criteria, meaning the moisture ingress, the debris ingress, and everything like that. The only problem is the reader chipset cannot function at the negative 29 degrees that are required in order to be used outdoors. So in places like Canada, I would not recommend this as an outdoor solution. I would recommend this more as an interior door. But in, let's say, Arizona here, we would use it as on an outswing door to our building because it never really gets any colder or any hotter to where it gets out of the limit. So I just want to make a clear distinction there between the 1516 and the ES100. Yes, Katie, the batteries last. I think there's one that covers that, but the batteries are approximately 45,000 cycles. So if you want to think about what that is, if your door were to operate 50 times a day, that's over 2 years worth of battery life. And that's including weekends, so times 7. It's a motor-driven, fail-secure only. So where the 1600 I showed earlier had a fail-safe operation that you can convert to, this does not. It is a fail-secure only product. And even with the last little bit of power that it has left, if it's going to run out of batteries, it will use the very last ounce of juice to convert the strike back into a lock state. So just know that if you've ignored for months the low battery warnings, or the month actually of low battery warnings, and everybody going up to it and it starts degrading and reading cards because of the battery just starting to go out, it will just convert itself back into a lock state, so it won't be removed, it won't be stuck in an unlocked condition. It's available in the same 7 finishes, including the stainless steel, which is the most popular. Black suede is really nice. We've been seeing that a lot in the aluminum style frames, just for the color matching and palette, and it blends in a lot with the reader and kind of the opening. And then also with the complete packs with all the interchangeable faceplates, it's going to make the strike compatible with all the rest of the lock sets out there on the market. All right. Again, here's a little snapshot of how it looks and kind of the credentials that it supports: the high frequency, MyFair, DesFire, NFC, and BLE. And really what's important to note here is the applications. It's primarily for swinging, hollow metal, and wood, and multi-door. So we do offer a 1-to-1 kit, which is prepared from the factory with a Wiegand 1-to-1 hub and the strike and the reader, of course. And so what it is it's an out-of-the-box wholesale solution that you don't need to be Aperio certified for, and you can just install it on a single opening wirelessly and tie back to the EAC And what's awesome about Weekend is you have a lot of inputs and outputs there on the hub that you may not have in some of the more complex 1 to 8, 1 to 16, 1 to 64 configurations. So again, this is just a nice prepared snapshot to also talk about and bring up the new monitoring features that we have. So it has the same type of monitoring that our 1600 does today. But again, you don't have to hardwire your monitoring. We have connectors that are in the back of the strike. You can actually mount to the strike and then plug into the back, and it'll relay wirelessly back to the access control system, both latch status, door position status, and lock state of the strike. Oh, was there a question I missed up here? Let's see, can we make integrations with software layer or can be hardware layer? I mean, connect the Aperio gateways to our controllers and implement all access control functionality in our system. I'll take that one offline, but the short answer is yes, we can. But again, we can talk offline with that. We'll get your email. You can email me actually at matt.branson@asaabloy.com. That's I've got an extensive answer and a person that I want you to talk to help get that situated, but we definitely can. All right, moving along. So now we've talked a little bit about the ES100 and kind of, we didn't have a picture of how it was mounted. I actually kind of want to go back a minute to cover that. So if you look down there at the bottom right, really there's that rainbow connector right there. That's the main power and data connector. What's really important to note here is it can't necessarily just be injected with electricity or power and be overrun, right? There's intelligence in it. So there's actually 128-bit encryption in between both the reader and the strike. So it's not just somebody can kick the reader off the wall and try to defeat it. It won't do that. It has tamper and it will set off alarm there, one on the reader. And number two, anytime you start messing with the wires, anything changes while it's not disconnected, it's going to send an alert back to the alarm system. But regardless, it's nice to know that not only is the hardware encrypted in its communication to each other, but it's also 128-bit encryption back to the Aperio hub. So again, you're encrypted at the specific opening and then with your communication back to the hub for security purposes. That's one thing to note, that a lot of other products that are out there on the market can be defeated just from a simple power injection or something along those lines. So it was so important for us to be able to create that connection, knowing that, you know, readers are not always the most secured. Sometimes they're installed into drywall and things like that. So if they are able to gain access, you don't want them to be able to maybe take off another reader and put it on and unlock the strike because they have access to one door, but not this one. It doesn't work that way. They're all paired together. They're all encrypted. You can't do that. You can't just inject power, or you can't use another reader to override this strike. All right. So making the connection, how does this function? So essentially, let's say you have this installed. You have the strike inside the door with the reader on one side. When a card is presented to the connected reader, I'm going to read this verbatim, and the user is authorized to access the door at that time, the strike releases, allowing the passage through the opening. So strike can be connected to a DPS as well, or an Opt1 LM kit, which you can actually install the monitoring in the field. You don't have to buy it monitored. You can actually install it later if you need to. But again, what you're doing is you're signaling the reader, which is sending a wireless signal to the hub, and then the hub will check your access control system to see if they have the proper credential access. And if so, it'll relay a signal to unlock and allow the user, or if they're not allowed, it will actually not unlock for it and show a red read. So when a valid credential is presented, the ES100 card reader activates and the keeper is released and allows the latch access granted. So basically the strike just opens and allows egress, which is, you don't necessarily have to turn the handle like you normally would with a traditional lock set, which allows you to do something like pair with an auto operator, which is one of the benefits of using electric strike as opposed to an electrified lock set or something like that in the market. So the reader communicates with the Aperio hub wirelessly in order to verify the card information. The only wiring, again, is required at the opening is the connection between the strike and the reader. And that's essentially just a hole that you drill in between. It's a ½ inch hole. That way the connectors can all be fed through in worst case scenario with the DPS and the latch monitor. So when someone presents the card to the reader wirelessly receives an encrypted ID number. The card reader then sends the ID number to the access control panel via the Weekend communication line. So in this specific scenario, we're talking about a one-to-one solution using Weekend. So again, Aperio uses its own local wireless communication between the reader and the hub to connect back to the EAC. So access control panels are made up of a series of boards. There's a lot of different companies and have a lot of different operations and executions in order to make the digital network work, but that allow entry in and out of, or control of the entry in and out of an area. So again, in this specific scenario, this one-to-one hub is connected to the panel in order to deliver the card ID number and ultimately determine whether to allow a user to enter or allow the entry to be permissible. And then again, the access control software is really the core of the system. So a lot of OEMs have already tested the product and validated it with their systems. Again, it stores authorization information, is configured by the system admin, and also is able to read the audit trail through their online functionality and software. The control panel receives the card number from the reader and kind of compares it to the ID number in their system, and that's loaded already in their system. If the numbers match, the user is authorized to enter, just like we talked about before. This is just a nice walkthrough of how you would present a card and how the strike would function and unlock while talking back to the access control system. Actually, the hub, and then back to the access control system. That hub is the key kind of intermediary. It's the third person that handles the communication between the devices. So now that we've talked about kind of how it communicates, it's really important, and we've done a whole video on it where we're going to be releasing here very soon on how to install the ES100 electric strike. So we're going to focus on the reader here first, but before modifying the mounting area or wall frame, you want to make sure that there's enough room to connect the reader and the strike. There is about 15 inches of cabling between the strike and reader. So if you have an application that requires more than that, you're going to run into an issue. So I wouldn't recommend going wireless at all. The more length you try to add to that, it will cause adverse functionality in the product, meaning when you're trying to send data and power over a connection that's that small, you can't really go much further than that. We tried to maximize our length as much as we could. So 15 inches is about the distance from the strike to reader. But you got to remember, 15 inches is how much cabling there is. You want to have a little bit of slack. You don't want to be able to pull it off and disconnect by accident or something along those lines, like when you're changing the batteries on the reader. You want to allow 3 inches to be able to pull the reader off, remove the batteries, and swap them out. There's also something right now, it's got a 3M automotive adhesive, which it's a VHB tape. I don't have my demo mount handy, but I've tried removing it with just the VHB tape, and it's proven very difficult. I've used a lot of force and tried to pry it off, and I just couldn't get it. But there are areas where you need a little bit higher security. So there's in the floor, there's 3 areas you can specifically drill out with an 1/8 inch drill bit, and you can use a screw. Obviously, material proper screw. If you're doing it a wood, drywall screws, use a drywall anchor. Metal screws, you can tap it, or you can use self-tapping, regardless. So that way you can mount the reader with both the adhesive and screws. The only thing that we ask is the reader is IP54 rated, so it does prevent moisture and debris ingress. So if you want to maintain that IP rating, it's very highly recommended that you use some sort of an RTV or sealant in conjunction with the screws, so that way nothing seeps in between that. So if water were to run, let's say, down the wall or down the frame where you installed the product, you don't want it to seep in. And so that's where we recommend doing that, because there is a fully sealed piece right there. That VHB is right around the only hole. And then there's also that gasket right there that seals around the entire product. So just make sure that if you're inside of that and you're drilling holes, that you have some sort of a way to prevent moisture or debris ingress. And then again, I know I already touched base on this. I jumped the gun a little bit. If you're mounting to the reader to drywall, use the 3M tape always. And then also make sure to use the flathead screws with drywall anchors. Flathead screws are important here because you don't want them to protrude. You don't want like button head screws where they collide with the electronics and could possibly cause a short inside of it. So 3 flathead screws that will fit inside of that 1/8 inch that are material appropriate. So again, drywall, I'd use a drywall anchor plus any other materials or tools that you would use for drywall and installation. So if you're mounting to concrete or a brick, you'd still always use that 3M tape. But again, you'd still want to use the flathead screws. That way you can make it, and you can make sure that they sit flush. And then maybe concrete or masonry anchors or a masonry drill bit you're going to need in order to get through that. But regardless, if high security is really what you're after, you're going to need to drill these out and install with material appropriate screws and material appropriate hardware. So that way it doesn't get kicked off the door, or it's just another higher level of security. Now, if you're mounting the reader to like glass or stone, again, no screws or drilling to avoid unsightly cracks and potentially weakening the mounting surface. This is where we just use the 3M adhesive. We know plenty of people have just used the 3M adhesive, but again, the added layer of security, it's recommended that you use the screws if you'd like. But again, if you're mounting on material like drywall where it's weak and you know somebody can just pull it off, that's really where we recommend the screws. And lastly, if you're mounting the reader to a hollow metal, aluminum, or timely frame, still use that same 3M tape with flathead stealth tapping screws, or if you want to tap your own, that's fine, depending on how much material you have there. Just always remember that if it's aluminum, it's pretty soft. You may want to be able to use some blind nuts inside of there and make sure you have a nice deep mounting surface, and so somebody can't just pull it off the wall, because aluminum is really soft, and if you use some self-tapping screws, you may run into a problem. But just know that frame mounting may be a little more increased wear and tear due to the unintended contact made when going in and out of the opening, or somebody maybe using a cart or a chair or something like that, because it sits off the frame a little bit rather than being recessed kind of a little bit away from the door. You tend to run into more collisions, at least from the feedback we've seen in the field. Awesome. So we talked about the ES100. I'm going to jump over to the Aperio wireless technology kind of as a platform here. We're moving at a good pace, so just keep on trucking. All right, so these are all of our ASA ABLOY access control partners who are certified in Aperio and have validated the use with our product, and they use a lot of other different products, but there are 53 partners and 59 different integrators we specifically pair with. And if you want to become part of that, that's one of the things you can email us about. But again, we have a wide variety of teams. Pretty much anywhere you can go, you can start finding Aperio product, whether it's the IN100 from Sargent, or one of our cabinet locks or server locks. There's a lot of different solutions out there, and Aperio is kind of one of the broadest wireless solutions markets, product market out there. So again, we have pretty much a wireless solution for any style of opening. So again, this is one that I talked about a little bit earlier, and I wanted to cover specifically because it's slightly different, and it doesn't require any sort of certification. You can buy this, we call it a wholesale kit. Off the shelf, it's ready to go. They have them in stock at ADI, Security Lock, Anixter, things like that. But specifically, what it includes is the AH20 hub, which is a 1-to-1 hub integrated weekend. And then it includes for some reason, it shows the Sargent IN100 right there, or lock set. It really includes the electric strike and reader. And then those would communicate wirelessly, and you would wire the hub back to your access control panel and then back to your EAC system, obviously. So what's awesome here is it's an easy integration with existing systems. So if you don't have wire, if you have an access control system at your building already, and you want to add access control to a singular door that doesn't already have power, this is the easiest way to do it. Wiring up one singular hub up in the ceiling and then installing the hardware inside of the door at the cost that it's less than buying a 1500, 1600 today and one of the RP style HID or one of the new multi-class HID readers. Again, this one's a simple wired connection. We have everything lined up here. The one device per hub. So that's one thing to note. It's not a multi-device like it is with the certification, because there's a lot of other unlocked features and steps that you gain by going to the certification process, aside from just being able to connect more products to a single hub. So when we look at the RS485 hubs, I'm sorry, let me go back. So what's one thing to note here is there's a DPS, Rex, battery, and tamper. I forgot to mention that. So when you're going with the 1-to-1 hub, you are actually able to hardwire those into your reader. This is the only reader that's going to allow that. Once you start going into 1-to-8, there wouldn't be enough terminal blocks on the back there to make it advantageous. And so everything starts getting controlled by the EAC and separate relays if you wanted to. So that's where we move into the RS485. This is a one hub to multiple wireless devices. So again, this one just has more data and communication on it. But what it allows you is the flexibility to connect. Let's say you have a server room and you have wireless locks on it. So a lot of times people want to put more cost on the exterior of the opening of the server room for higher security purposes, and then also have your keyed layer security or a little bit lower security maybe on the lock set, because when you have a door that has an audit trail and high security, you can find out who's going in and out and grant access. It can't be overridden. And it's also easy to install, and you don't have to worry about running a bunch of conduit and wire outside of the server room, because it's mostly PoE style injectors and things like that. So again, this is one of the solutions where we talked about the dorm room earlier too. With a 1-to-8, you can have multiple doors, multiple locks, multiple cabinets. So if you were in a hospital, you can control the room, the cabinet to medicine, the storage closet, a lot of different things to files, all with one single hub and multiple devices. Again, here's just another breakdown of that. So the ES100 comes in two different styles, two different options, I should say. So we have the certified integrators and ACPs, which allows you to order the product without a hub. So essentially you get to configure it with a 1-to-8 or a 1-to-16 or a 1-to-64. It allows you to be a certified installer. It means you've gone through the proper training, that you know how to set up the features, install, and have the devices communicate to each other productively, rather than in a way that requires a little bit of the software integration side of it anyway. Whereas the wholesale kit's available to everybody who doesn't have any sort of Aperio knowledge. It just comes prepared out of the factory and allows you to install on a singular door. So I have list prices here, just so you can kind of get a reference, and that includes reader, faceplate, strike, everything you need to get up and going. And that's where the starting price point for the 630, which is kind of the most popular. So the convenience version is non-monitoring. It's just a traditional strike like there is today. And what we have is a security version, which includes both a latch monitor and a door position switch. Again, you can upgrade the convenience to a security out in the field with an Opt1 LM kit. But again, it's really your choice. You can either buy it pre-configured from the factory, or you can just install it yourself out in the field and carry a couple of the accessories with you. That way, when you need it, you need it. When you don't, no big deal. You just install the strike like you would normally. The wholesale kit includes all that, but also the 1-to-20 hub, or I'm sorry, 1-to-1 hub, AH20, 1-to-1 hub. And again, the list price there is both separated in convenience and in security, depending on whether you want monitored or not. And that can be upgraded in the field to monitored as well. Awesome. So this one, we have a streamlined process coming. I would love to have it rolled out before I talk to you guys on this, but we weren't able to get it done. Regardless, I'll talk about what it's like today. The ACP CI training ensures that the company has the skills and expertise to recommend, sell, quote, order, install, all those verbs to create a functional Osabloy intelligent opening solution. So again, this is a training, not necessarily a certification. There's different roles from people in the company should attend, depending on what their duties and responsibilities are. So again, we have people who are actually doing the installation, but we also have people for the sales teams for OEMs or maybe IP systems and software. So yes, you may be an installer and there's a certain part of the training that's important to you, but if there's somebody else in your sales team you want to get the pitch on how Aperio works and functions, ties in, and how to become a certified integrator or authorized channel partner, that's a different type of training, but we still have all that information available to you. Again, if you want to reach out to us afterwards for more information, you can do that. You can also visit intelligentopenings.com. We'll touch that here a little bit later and get you in touch with somebody local to you that can set something like this up. All right, let's dive into the hubs. How are we doing on time? I think we're doing okay. Yeah, I got about 18 minutes. All right. So the good thing that's important about the hubs is they're all certified CE, ETL, FCC, IC. So it's not just in the States. This is kind of a national protocol, or I'm sorry, a worldwide protocol. And the hub capacity, which I talked about earlier, we've got the 1-to-1, which is the AH20. We've got the RS485, which is actually, it says 1 to asterisk because it's actually 1-to-8 and 1-to-16. It depends on which version you have. And then the IP also depends on which version you have. It's either 1-to-16 or 1-to-64. So the IP version, which is the AH40, can actually communicate the latest version with up to 64 devices, as long as your system is updated and ready for that integration in regards to like your platform, whether it be like the Linnell or something along those lines. So it has an integrated directional antenna, and it has an optional external omnidirectional antenna. And there's a certain pattern that each one emits, and we're going to go over that here in just a minute. But again, it's the same 2.4 gigahertz protocol you see, like Zigbee, Z-Wave, that kind of stuff. And it's 128-bit AES encrypted, so it's not easy to defeat. It's obviously safe and secure. And then it's recommended for install and humidity 95% non-condensing from 5 degrees to 35 degrees. So it's an IP20, but we want this installed inside. You don't necessarily want this outside to the elements. If you are going to install it outside, it'll be recommended in a gang box with some sort of a heating element, because as soon as you get too cold in certain areas, you may run into a problem. This is just a visual breakdown. So what we just kind of talked about, but a little bit further in depth. The 1-to-1 will only work, or will work with any Wiegand circuit. It's one of the reasons why it's important, and it's kind of one of the more popular options, is we see it for just kind of a single door solution in the wholesale market with a lot of locksmiths and MSCs and things like that. So again, you can install that one prepared with our product without having any sort of certification. So the AH30 is the RS485 connection. And again, it can do a 1-to-8, or the newest generation is a 1-to-16. Then the AH40 is Ethernet, it's IP. So it's either a 1-to-16 if you have the older model, or the newest generation, it shouldn't say next, it's newest actually, it's actually out now, is a 1-to-64, and it works via an Ethernet connection. I can't stress enough though, make sure that your software partner can leverage the benefit of a 1-to-64 with the product, and make sure they're using the latest and greatest AH40 hub in order to be able to get that 1-to-64 communication. It's really important. All right, best practices. This one is super important because you want to, again, we talked about the site survey and the importance of interference and things like that. So the internal antenna is a football shaped RF pattern radiating 50 feet out from the face of the hub. Do we have that image? There we go. So if you look here on the left-hand side, that's the internal antenna and kind of how it functions. If you're familiar with microphones, it kind of looks like one of the cardioid style sound frequencies and how it picks up sound. But anyway, the one on the left is with the internal antenna. And if you look at how that room's situated, not necessarily ideal for that specific scenario. Where you look at the external antenna, it's actually a donut-shaped RF pattern, and it radiates 25 feet perpendicular to the antenna. So it's a 25-foot radius. So if you run it around, you can kind of see if that were a 15-foot room, if you see the rooms cut down there, it would be able to access all those openings. But again, if that were placed in the center of the room, that's how it would emit. So if you look at the one on the right, the hub's in the center of the room because it's got the donut shape, whereas the one on the left, it's on the wall because it's kind of an oblong football shape. But you may have issues with some of the farther doors on both the left and the right that are not within kind of that band. Hub to hub separation. This is important because there are a lot of high density applications. We actually did for Stanford, their mailroom, and they had over 200 devices in a single room. And one of the reasons why that's important is you need to keep the hubs far enough away so they don't interfere with each other, because they're constantly sending signals back and forth. So based on our mass unit testing, it needs to be at least 8 inches apart in order to successfully not mix up signal with each other, or not necessarily mix up signal, but to prevent communication errors. Now the hub to lock separation is the same, the 8 inches, but 16 feet above the lock is the limit. So from height standpoint, from a y-axis, you want to make sure that you're not more than 16 feet above where your locking solution is going to be. So even though that football band's there, the height of it's only 16 feet. Metal, keep at least 8 inches away from any metal beams and studs. So you don't want to mount this directly to metal. It affects the way everything resonates and it receives, and patterns actually block some of the ability to receive and send signals. And then ceiling installations, install hubs below the ceiling. It's definitely allowed. Above the ceiling requires kind of a plenum rated housing, because you're going to have all kinds of stuff going in instead of there. But as you saw in that hospital, below the ceiling is kind of been the most popular, because most people, they still don't have access to get to that ceiling. Even if they got a stool, we wonder what they were doing, but then getting up there, they don't really know what they're doing once they get there, unless they're certified in working with the Aperio and your access control system. Again, moving over this, I'm trying to find a way to combine those two so I can talk to them in one. And so we look at this one and the hub placement again, optimal placement for extended range and maximum capacity. That's the donut. And that was kind of in that other room. I think this one kind of suits it a little bit better because it covers every single door and encapsulates every opening that requires the wireless. And then also leave at least 8 inches of clearance from the hub to the roof rafters and trusses. Again, we talked about the potential metal interference and things like that. Again, on the right, there's a bunch of, that's just a single door, but it's showing you all the different options of where you can mount the hub. Again, it's not a very large hub. It's about 4 inches by 4 inches by 2 inches deep. So again, it can be mounted anywhere along drywall, ceiling. We see them mostly on ceiling tiles, but a lot on walls as well. And then here's other considerations we talked about. The height. This is just a reiteration or a visual representation of it within 16 feet from above the lock. So on this one over here to the right, it says 16 to 50. Yeah, that wouldn't necessarily work if it were over 50 feet. Again, we talked about things that can cause interference, ensure separation. So the separation we recommend based on validation is 3.5 feet to 12 feet from any microwave oven, any motor, any exit signs, any wireless access points. That includes, like your Wi-Fi or cellular, any other radio transmitters. So it depends on what kind of communication device and what type of, if you're at a police station or something like that, you're going to have other radio transmitters, pagers, security radios, cordless phones. And again, that's for the wireless hub. Your devices can be kind of around there. And again, just remember, the more devices you have in a room, the more interference that can potentially be caused. But again, you can change your channels and things like that. If something else is running on the 2.4 gigahertz band, that's accessible through the PAP tool, but you have to be certified Aperio installer to be able to do that. Again, at a 6-foot width to facilitate optimal hub placement. And now I believe that's everything I've got. So the one thing I will touch on, and it's one of the accessories that's really popular with ours, and I plan on running a promotion because I think everybody should have these that installs our strike, is just our metal template kit. It's really durable, and it has basically a 4 7/8 ANSI style prep, and you just mount whichever strike plate you're going to install. So this specific one, you would use the same one for the 1516 that we use for the ES100. You essentially trace it, or tape it, trace it, cut it. It makes it really simple to be able to just put it up there and have a nice, consistent and clean mount every time. Now, the cutting part's a little difficult for me. I'm not exactly a master at it. That's why I have the goof plates that make it look pretty when I'm done. But again, you don't have to use the metal template kit, but I'm just saying, if you have it, it's really small, compact, can fit inside of a toolbox, easy to install. And I plan on running a promo with these to kind of, anybody who goes with an ES100 is just going to get one of these, because in my opinion, every installer out there should have one of these for the product if you're going to install it. Simplifies it, makes it consistent every time. Here's actually an installation video of Roger doing it. So he's taped it up there, mounted the 4 7/8 prep, and then essentially that's the 1600 cutout. So he traces that and then cuts it out after. We also have another tool called the WT2. It's the Wiegand tester, and you can hardwire the hub to it and actually communicate with your device and test it. It's actually kind of what some of the OEMs and some of the beta testers did with our product, is we provided it to them, and they're already familiar with Aperio, and they had a WT2, and we had them run all different sorts of tests in regards to functionality and scenarios and user stories that were written up for them to execute. But regardless, the WT tool allows you to be able to test all the functionality with, let's say, a DPS, or that a card read is valid or invalid, and then the relock state, and then a time, and then also the raw card data, the card data format. It really tells you everything about it. It's almost like having a little mini EAC there to test out your Aperio product. It's really cool. And it's not just with our ES100, it works with a lot of the other different products, but just know that it's with the Wiegand hub. So it's the 1-to-1. So if you buy the WT2, it doesn't come with the hub, but if you buy the hub, you'll be able to test any of the Aperio products that you'd like. It can be used to test multiple. Oh, he already had that in there. I didn't catch that part. I remember seeing it in the slide, but I was wondering where it went. So again, you're simulating what's really going on. The cost of WT2, I don't remember off the top of my head. That's something I can get you afterwards. I'll follow up with you on that, Barry. If you can send me an email, I'll make sure to get that to you. All right, and then built app. This is something we started with our 1600 or M680E. Really super cool. So a lot of our instructions are rolled out into kind of a 3D video space where you can move the strike around, the product around, explode view it, kind of put it into the frame, see how it connects. Built is a great 3D walkthrough tool, and not only how to piece things together, but maybe how to do the install, or there's a certain warning that you need to know before you do a step. I really like the Built app and the way they've executed it. Makes it very simple. So you combine that with some of the accessories we just talked about with HES Cut MTK and WT2, and it really just, it makes it a cookie cutter install. And that's the kind of point of the product, right? It has the same prep pretty much anywhere you're going to install it. And so the goal is to make it not only wireless and simple and remove that need to run a wire, but just make it so as your techs, or you bring on new people, it's just a really simple format to execute on and install pretty much the same way every time. It's just a strike that you would cut in, tether it up to a reader that has multi-class reading technology with NFC and BLE, and connect it to a hub. And so if you have 8 devices, instead of wiring 8 different doors, you wire one single hub, and it talks to all the doors. Something really cool, and I think it's kind of the future of where products are going. And I was excited to be able to do it with an electric strike. I chose the 1600 because of its compatibility. But if you think about it, there's a lot of other platforms out there, specifically when we're talking about RIM, that there isn't a solution for wirelessly today. So as we start continuing this advancement of wireless product, there's definitely certain things to keep in mind, because there's a lot of different type of strike applications that we can accommodate for. But again, Built, I highly recommend downloading Built. It's a free app, has a lot of our different products on there, and a lot of different products out, not just ours. I mean, IKEA, all different kinds of tools inside of there. So if you want to be able to install something a little bit easier, to tell you the tools you need, how long it's going to take you, number of people, it's a really cool app, and I highly recommend it. Again, we have our ASA Abloy customer support app. It's really cool here. Our team's pretty much available during all business hours. But what's really cool here, and what I think is really important highlighting, is streaming video. So you can almost FaceTime with our tech support team and show them what you're running into at your door. So just point your phone at the camera at the door, and they can kind of see what's going on and help you troubleshoot it. That's something we didn't have before, where just words or describing it isn't enough. And so they have that video capability. And that's, again, while we're there and while we're open. If you look at the hours there, 7 to 5, and that's your local area. I mean, that's in the United States, but that's we'll be able to provide that video service, emails, chatting, resource center. Highly recommend downloading the app on your phone. It's the easiest way to do it, because you pretty much always have it with you and it's there for the install. But you can also do it on the computer as well. Regardless, the video features been a lifesaver, and it's helped us more times than I can recall. Additional resources from our customer support team is they always provide free custom wiring diagrams. Although this one doesn't necessarily need one, you may need help with wiring your hub. So even though it may not be your strike per se, you may need to wire your hub or configure it with your access control system or your alarm system in a specific way. They have virtual, on-demand, and in-person training. So our instructors, I mean, you've met Russ and Roger. They're amazing at what they do. They have such a wealth of knowledge. I appreciate their time and everything they do. And along with Katie setting up this digital version of everything, it's so important, and it's amazing that they're out there really willing to help, and they'll help with these type of wiring diagrams and everything too, and even code stuff. I mean, really, they make themselves available for everybody and truly care. And then again, the no fault, no questions asked warranty covers installation for most Securitron products. Again, that was inherited over to the electric strikes as well. So when we run into issues, a lot of times, you know, if they're available at like an Anixter and ADI, they'll swap them right out and they'll deal with the warranty process for you with us. So again, that happens a lot. But just remember the 10-minute rule. If you run into an obstacle or working on something and it takes longer than 10 minutes to solve it, just give us a call or chat with us on the tech support app. I mean, don't waste any more time than you need to. A lot of times we're picking up the phone in less than 15 seconds. And our phone calls are usually lasting less than 5 minutes. So a lot of times when we're dealing with this, sometimes it's just something so simple that maybe the instructions weren't as clear on as they should have been. And it's better to have somebody to talk to who's really well experienced while we're maybe getting those instructions updated internally so they don't continue to confuse people. But anyway, the 10-minute rule, live by it. Last but not least, connect with the team, Russ, Roger, me. I'm not on here, but my name is Matt Branson. I'm the product manager for Electric Strikes, matt.branson@asaabloy.com. But again, our tech support and customer service team, we actually have updated hours. That slide said to 5. It's actually 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. EST, Monday through Friday. You can call us at 1-800-MAGLOCK. And then obviously our emails are all here as well for the support team and customer care.